ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Allah and His Messenger have repeatedly told us in the Quran and in the Sunnah to learn from the people of the past, to learn from the history not only of Muslims but the history of humanity as a whole. He's told us to learn from the mistakes of people and the successes of people. Everything that we're trying to achieve today, that millions of human beings on the face of this earth who've gone by, lived the life that we wanted to live, and they've returned to Allah. So Allah tells us again and again in the Quran, study history. Look at the people who came before you. Learn from them. Learn from their mistakes and learn from their achievements and their successes. We talk about the history of Islam, or the Islam in America. It's a term you hear a lot. It's a term that is a topic of countless dinner table discussions. It invokes emotions and opinions. And with all due respect, when we usually say Islam in America, we mean Islam in the immigrant community of America. We usually start the history of Islam in this country 30, 40, 50 years ago when the first wave of immigration started to the shores of this country. That's usually where we start, and that's the perception in all of our minds. The history of Islam in America started approximately 50 years ago. As happy as I am here today to tell you about an individual that is the most influential Muslim in the history of this country. As happy as I am to talk to you about it, it saddens me a bit that for many of you, this is the first time you've ever heard his name. This is the first time most of you will hear his name. And if you've heard his name, you probably don't know the details of his life. And I'm not here to tell you why you don't know about him. I'm here to tell you about him. And I'm just going to give you a glimpse into the life of this man and how he shaped Islam and the history not only of Muslims in this country, of this country as a whole. I ask you to take your own initiative to research and study about this man after we are done. In Houston, I've been going around different masajid giving talks about this individual. And you will see by anyone's measure, he is the most influential Muslim in the history of this country. I've been going around in Houston, a major city like Houston, and in different masajid giving talks about him. And before the talk, I asked the audience, how many of you have heard about him? And I take his name. In about an audience of 50, 60, average of 1 or 2 people raise their hand and say, I've heard of this person. Overwhelming majority of people don't even know the name of this person or don't know about this person. So inshallah, you'll see the importance that he plays in the history of this country. Wallace D. Muhammad was born in a small town in Michigan in 1933. Small town in Michigan. He was born to Clara and Elijah Muhammad. We don't have time to go into the history of the Nation of Islam. In fact, inshallah, we'll do that tonight. Elijah Muhammad, the father of Wallace D. Muhammad, at the time was just taking over the Nation of Islam. For those of you that are not familiar with the Nation of Islam, it was an all-black movement that had a completely deformed theology of Islam. It wasn't really considered Islam. They used the name. Elijah Muhammad had just taken over as the leader of the Nation of Islam. And from 1934 to 1975, Elijah Muhammad grew the Nation of Islam to over 2 million followers and over 300 temples across the United States. W.D. or Wallace D. Muhammad was the son of Elijah Muhammad. He grew up in the household of the leader of the Nation of Islam, a completely deformed version of Islam. They said Islam is only for the black man and the white man is the devil, and that Allah was a human being walking on earth. It was completely, out there. Wallace D. Muhammad, Imam W.D. Muhammad, grew up as a senior minister. He grew up to be a very educated, influential person in the Nation of Islam. In fact, he used to go around the nation, across the country, training ministers on the theology and operations of the Nation of Islam. That's how influential he was. And it was known that after Elijah Muhammad, he is in line to take over the Nation of Islam. It was understood because of his leadership qualities. He was very inquisitive. From an early age, he did what most people didn't do. He learned Arabic and he studied the Quran. He's an African American in America. He learned Arabic and studied the Quran. In 1975, Elijah Muhammad passes away. His father passes away, and he leaves behind, as I mentioned, a network of over 2 million African Americans and over 300 temples, as they called it, across the country. Imam W.D. Muhammad is chosen as the leader of the Nation of Islam. Again, they're not, you wouldn't consider them Muslim. He takes over this large network. And Elijah Muhammad, as off as theology was, he was a genius. The entire Nation of Islam structure was supported by their own financial institutions. He had built businesses, industries that supported the growth of the Nation of Islam. At one point in this country's history, during the Civil Rights era, Elijah Muhammad was named the most powerful black man in America because of the network of Nation of Islam that he had built. Now, Imam W.D. Muhammad, this is what he's taking over. This is what he's inheriting. But Imam W.D. Muhammad, Wallace D. Muhammad, was different. He didn't believe any of the theology of the Nation of Islam. He'd studied the Quran. He was what you would call a true Muslim. He was a Sunni Muslim. So when he took over, he made it clear to his followers that I'm taking over today. I'm not going to be like my father was. I'm going to bring my own changes. And in 1975, he set in motion what is to be considered one of the largest community transformations in the history of the world in recent times. Not only this country, in the history of this time. The first thing Imam W.D. Muhammad wanted to correct was the people's theology, the belief. So slowly, he started spreading the message across that Islam is not only for the black man. The white man is not the devil. Allah was not a human being walking on this earth. Allah is one. He revealed the Quran to the last messenger, the Prophet ﷺ. And we are his followers. We are his nation. We are part of the Muslims. So he slowly started correcting the belief. And he got rid of the name, the Nation of Islam. And he slowly had different names, but eventually he dropped all names and we're Muslims. The next thing he did, Imam W.D. Muhammad, is he instituted salah, prayer. In the Nation of Islam, they pray 5 times a day, but it's not salah like we pray salah. They used to face the east with their hands up and used to recite a few words, that's it. Imam W.D. Muhammad thought it to be one of the priorities of teaching people. He called all the ministers from across the nation that were heading all the temples. He called them and said, we need to start instituting prayer. They said, Imam, we don't know how to pray. He taught every single minister how to perform salah. And he said, by the way, you're not called ministers anymore, you're an imam. And these are not temples, these are mosques. Go back to your communities and start teaching the people how to pray and institute salah 5 times a day. Slowly but surely, across the nation, people started praying because he taught them how to pray. They didn't fast. In fact, they used to fast a few days in December around Christmas time. Imam W.D. Muhammad said, we fast in Ramadan with the rest of the Muslim Ummah. We're Muslims, we fast according to the Prophet ﷺ in Ramadan, so they started instituting fasting. They had no system of zakah or sadaqah. There was a lot of corruption when he took over. A lot of the ministers were cheating people. So he got rid of all of them and he cleaned up the system and said the money has to go to the needy and the poor. And he started instituting that. And mind you, this is in every major city across the US. in 1970s. People did have, the Nation of Islam, they didn't have a Friday prayer like we do. They didn't have a khutbah. So he called all the imams and said, we need to start having Jummah. He said, Imam, we don't know how to perform Jummah. He taught all of them how to give a basic khutbah, and he said, next week, starting Friday, you start having Jummah prayers. He instituted that. He started teaching the people, learn the Quran, study the Quran, free your mind with the Quran, become slaves of Allah, not slaves of your desires. He brought about the concept of Hajj. In 1977, at the time, he led the largest delegation of Muslims to Hajj, over 300 people. Before he took over, Elijah Muhammad used to have a weekly radio address, where he used to start with a prayer or a praise about himself. The week when Imam W.D. Muhammad took over, and in his first radio address, he started with, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, and he recited Surah Al-Fatiha. And this is being broadcast across the nation in every major city. This is the first time many of them heard the Quran. By the end of it, Imam W.D. Muhammad, rahimahullah, brought in over 2 million people into Islam. A transformation unprecedented, not only in the history of this country, but in the history of modern times. He took these people out of darkness, out of kufr, to Sunni Islam, to the Quran, to the Prophet ﷺ. And 2 million people plus. All the masajid, all the temples that used to be called Nation of Islam were now mosques, where people are praying salah, people are worshipping Allah because of the leadership of Imam W.D. Muhammad and the guidance that Allah gave him. On a side note, one of the followers of the Nation of Islam, Farah Khan, he broke off and restarted the Nation of Islam, and it's still present to this day, but in a very small form. Malcolm X, all of you have heard of Malcolm X. He's more famous than Imam W.D. Muhammad. Malcolm X was the spokesperson, the national spokesperson for the Nation of Islam. And he left the Nation of Islam before Imam W.D. Muhammad took over. And as a side, a historical point over here, his name, Malcolm X. He was not the only one with the name X. It was a very common name, because Elijah Muhammad told his followers, the names that you have were given to you by your slave masters. They're not your real names. So he said, you don't know your ancestry, we don't know our ancestry. So the X represents unknown, like in math. X is for unknown. I don't know my last name, I don't know my ancestry. So you see this even to this day, many people have the last name X. That's the history of the name. What Imam W.D. Muhammad did, how he transformed that community of millions of people and bringing them into the fold of Islam in this country, it didn't go unnoticed. Muslim nations around the globe honored him, studied him, asked him how he did it, invited him to speak to the people. He was recognized the world over. He is the first Muslim to be invited by the United States Congress to open prayer in the Congress. He was officially recognized as the leader of Muslims in America. He was officially recognized as the leader of Muslims in America. He's the only person to be invited by the Vatican, where the Pope resides, the head of the Catholic Church. He was the only Muslim, to my knowledge, to this day, who's been invited to the Vatican to speak from where the Pope speaks. Because of his efforts of how he transformed the community, he took them out of darkness and took them to light. These are just some of the things that Imam W.D. Muhammad was able to accomplish. September 9th, 2008, Imam W.D. Muhammad passed away of a heart attack in Chicago. That's right, 2008. And unfortunately, that's the first day I'd ever heard of it. I've ever heard his name. A friend of mine texted me and says, Imam W.D. Muhammad passed away, may Allah have mercy on him. So I replied back, was that some local imam? He said, no, it's some national speaker. So I thought, must be some national spokesperson. So I didn't really bother. And it was not only until last year I met a student of Imam W.D. Muhammad and learned about his life. He passed away in Chicago in 2008. The Chicago Tribune reported his janazah was attended by 8,000 people. To this day, it's the largest janazah on US soil. 8,000 people attended this man's janazah because of the love that they had for him, because he brought them to Allah when they were lost. The transformation that this man has brought about, I told you of what he's done for the Muslim community. I have left out what impact he had on modern American society. As you know, the Nation of Islam and Imam W.D. Muhammad impacted a lot of the stuff that we see today, from the culture, to the hip-hop culture, to the African Americans of today. His impact and his legacy lives on today. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وصحبه وسلم والاه. The Prophet ﷺ says, every century Allah sends an individual to revive Islam amongst the people. Every century Allah sends someone to revive Islam amongst the people. And many of the scholars say that this is unique to each geographic location. It's not one person necessarily for the entire world. It's each person for their locality, to revive Islam amongst the people. If anyone wants to study the history of America and the Muslims in America, by all measures, Allah knows best, Imam W.D. Muhammad is the only one that fits that description. Imam W.D. Muhammad is the only one who would fit the description of reviving Islam in America amongst the people. To this day, today, there's no one alive who's had the impact in this country that he's had on Muslims. And like I told you, even though I hope it's not true, for many of you, this is the first time you're hearing his name. And the reasons are different of why the immigrant community never mixed with the African American community. And that's why we've left the lessons that he had to offer. At the end of it, if you look at it, we're trying to achieve what he already achieved. We're trying to transform ourselves and transform our communities to be closer to Allah. We have a live example, a successful example of how to do that in this country, yet we're not even looking at it. We've turned a blind eye to it. Allah says, learn from the people who came before you. Learn how they accomplished what they accomplished, because it will help you and I live life better today. That is our outlook on history. It's something we look back at so we can implement today, the successes and the failures. If you were to learn one thing from Imam W.D. Muhammad today, it would be one simple principle. He said the Quran is the foundation of life. He said, someone asked him once, I want to go study overseas. I want to go study overseas in the Muslim lands. So he said, tell me one thing. Are the Muslim nations today, are they followers or are they leaders? He said, they're followers. He picked up the Quran. He said, if they follow this, they'd be leaders. Because this book it didn't come to follow, it came to lead. The Quran came to lead people. It didn't come to follow books or people. It came to be the direction for people. So everything that he did was based in the Quran. He told the people, learn the Quran, study the Quran, think with the Quran. Allah has given you a mind. It's the key to freeing your mind is the Quran. And when you make the Quran the lens which you look through life, the world around you will come alive. We forget that this book is divine revelation. And it's the highest form of education you can have. No matter what PhDs, what degrees you have, the Quran the revelation is the highest form of education. The revelation is the highest form of education. I'm going to end with a story. Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, you've all heard of it. He was a very famous scholar in Saudi Arabia. He was the I think the top scholar at one time in the world. He invited Imam W.D. Muhammad to meet with him and specifically asked him how he achieved what he was able to achieve. He said, "Ya Imam, you've taken millions of people from kufr to Islam. How did you do that?" So he wanted to know details, he wanted to know what he did. And then if you don't know, Imam W.D. Muhammad, a lot of his lectures and his talks are online. And when you hear him talk, he's a very soft-spoken person. And you can, Allah knows best, you can feel the sincerity and the humbleness in him. He's a very humble person. And his answer is what I'm going to leave you with. When Shaykh bin Baz asked him, "What did you do that you were able to make such an impact?" He said, "I told the people the truth and they followed." He said, "All I did was simply tell them the truth and they followed." In other words, he said, "I showed them the true revelation. I just showed it to them. This was nothing of my genius. All I did was present Quran to them in a way that they could digest, that they could relate to, and it did what the Quran and Islam are supposed to do. It transformed their world upside down in the right direction." If you want to see the closest impact that the Quran had to the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, how it changed their life, the closest thing you would find is how Imam W.D. Muhammad and his followers implemented the Quran. Because their circumstances were similar. They were considered second-class citizens, the lowest of the low, and they became slaves of Allah and rose to ranks that even to this day people cannot rise. Imam W.D. Muhammad rahimahullah is the most influential person in the history of this country. And we owe it, we don't talk about him to sing his praises for no reason. It's to learn what he did. How can we benefit from what he did not too long ago and make our lives better as Muslims today, and inshallah do more than what he ever expected the Muslims to do. Because at the end of it all, we are trying to transform ourselves and we're trying to transform our communities. And the vehicle for that is the Quran. And Imam W.D. Muhammad reminded us that of that simple message. The Quran is there for you to follow. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وأقم الصلاة